The US economy isn't weakening, it's collapsing from the inside out, and the proof is everywhere. When a country introduces 50-year mortgages, 15-year car loans, and rent spikes of 30% in 1 year, it means the system has already failed. Families are cramming into sheds, professionals earning six figures are moving back home, and grocery bills are hitting $500 a week just to survive. Medical insurance doubles overnight. Property taxes jump by $5,000 to $8,000 in a single billing cycle. This isn't inflation. This is structural breakdown. A nation quietly entering its most dangerous economic phase in decades. The first and most undeniable signal that the US economy is breaking apart is the collapse of basic housing mechanics. When affordability dies, every other sector follows, and that collapse is now visible from Miami to Chicago to Southern California. The arrival of 50-year mortgages proves households can no longer meet even the minimum thresholds of traditional lending. A loan stretched across half a century isn't innovation. It's an admission that conventional income levels can't support current home prices under any economic model. Across major metros, the strain is quantifiable. Rent increases of $400 to $800 a month have become normal, not exceptional. Property taxes that once rose slowly are now jumping by 30% to 70% in a single reassessment cycle. A typical homeowner in Cook County saw bills climb from $6,000 to $13,000, instantly destabilizing budgets that were already stretched by higher utilities and insurance premiums. In coastal cities, the price of entry into a modest apartment now requires incomes far above regional standards. Santa Monica's studios demanding nearly $5,000, one-bedrooms exceeding $6,300, and three-bed units approaching $12,000 before fees. This is no longer a coastal anomaly. Overcrowding is spreading nationally as millions run out of options. Homes designed for one family now shelter 3 or 4, with 6 to 8 vehicles lining driveways because multi-generational, multi-tenant survival has replaced independent living. Even the lower end of the market has fractured. Converted garages, tool shed efficiencies, and backyard micro-units are becoming the last refuge for full-time workers. These are not temporary disruptions. They are structural symptoms of an economy where wages, taxes, and housing costs no longer intersect. The broader consequence is systemic immobility. People can't move for jobs because they can't afford new rents. They can't downsize because even cheap areas have been inflated by remote work migration. They can't buy because mortgages now function like lifetime leases. And they can't remain where they are because taxes and insurance are pushing ownership into negative cash flow. Housing is not just unaffordable. It has become mathematically incompatible with the income distribution of the country. And when a society can't house its workforce, every other economic pillar begins to fall. The housing breakdown is only possible because the financial foundation underneath it, worker income, has collapsed in real terms. The core crisis of the modern US economy is the widening divergence between what people earn and what basic survival now costs. This is not a minor gap, it is a structural rupture. Since 2020, essentials have risen at multiples far beyond wage adjustments. Food categories that once increased by 2% to 3% a year now rise by 20% to 40% cumulatively. Insurance premiums that hovered around $150 to $200 for many workers have surged toward $350 to $700 per month. Commuting, utilities, and general services follow the same upward trajectory. This is why full-time employment no longer guarantees stability. Even high-income brackets are showing signs of erosion. A salary of $80,000 to $120,000, once positioned as upper middle class, can now be entirely consumed by rent, healthcare, transportation, and debt obligations before savings are even possible. The inflation that policymakers describe as moderate becomes catastrophic when applied to categories that dominate household budgets. A $150 monthly health insurance jump or a $100 rise in utilities is not absorbed the same way a discretionary expense would be. These are non-negotiable recurring charges, and they stack relentlessly. Meanwhile, employers facing automation, cost-cutting, and slowed revenue growth are suppressing wage increases. Entire industries, marketing, design, administrative support, customer service, have watched incomes stagnate or decline as AI and outsourcing replace labor with software. The result is a workforce that is technically employed yet financially deteriorating year over year. This new form of poverty is particularly destructive because it hides behind job titles, degrees, and full-time schedules. The psychological impact is measurable. Workers report having less than $500 left after bills, even with decades of experience. Savings rates have collapsed to near record lows. Retirement contributions are being paused or eliminated entirely. Discretionary spending, once a marker of normal life, is shrinking into survival mode budgeting. The erosion of purchasing power is so severe that even minor price shifts create crisis-level stress. This wage cost divergence fuels every other fragility in the economy. When full-time workers can no longer cover basic monthly expenses, the system loses its ability to regenerate demand, maintain stability, or support long-term growth. The collapse of affordability is not a glitch in the economy. It is the economy. The wage cost divergence becomes even more devastating when you factor in the quiet, relentless financial pressure of the U.S. healthcare system. Medical expenses have evolved from a budget item into a full-scale extraction mechanism, draining workers faster than any rent increase or utility spike. The numbers reveal the severity. Individual insurance premiums that once averaged $150 to $200 per month are now reaching $350 to $750, often withdrawn automatically from paychecks before workers even see their income. Annual deductibles commonly exceed $4,000 to $8,000, guaranteeing that most Americans pay out of pocket before insurance coverage begins to offer meaningful relief. This new burden is not limited to catastrophic events. It affects basic, predictable medical needs. Routine prescriptions, specialist visits, and diagnostic tests have risen far faster than nominal wages. A single urgent care visit can cost $250 without testing. Premium increases of 40% to 70% over a few renewal cycles are becoming the norm across employers, forcing millions to downgrade or cancel coverage altogether. The system effectively punishes anyone who tries to stay insured, while offering no safety net to those who opt out. The most destabilizing part is the shift from insurance as protection to insurance as an ongoing financial liability. Workers now lose hundreds of dollars per paycheck to maintain policies that often provide less coverage than plans from a decade ago. Health-related payroll deductions routinely exceed $700 to $900 for individuals and $1,400 to $2,000 for families, consuming income that was once used for housing, food, or savings. In many cases, medical premiums alone rival the cost of rent in lower-cost regions. This burden fuels a growing reliance on medical forbearance, deferred treatments, and rising personal debt. Even insured individuals are accumulating unpaid medical balances that compound monthly. For many households, the daily interest on past due healthcare bills adds up to more than credit card minimums, making medical debt one of the fastest-growing bankruptcy triggers in the country. The medical burden spiral directly accelerates economic fragility. When workers must choose between insurance premiums and food, between deductible payments and rent, the entire financial structure becomes unsustainable. Healthcare, once considered a stabilizing pillar of modern life, has transformed into one of the primary engines pushing fully employed Americans toward collapse. The medical burden spiral feeds directly into the next destabilizing force: the unprecedented surge in everyday living costs. Essentials that once anchored the middle-class budget, groceries, electricity, internet, transportation, are now eroding household finances at a pace no salary structure can match. This is not the moderate inflation described in official reports. It's an accelerated cost explosion that affects items people cannot avoid. Food inflation is the clearest example. Weekly grocery runs that averaged $180 to $220 a few years ago are now routinely surpassing $400 to $600, even for small households. Staples like eggs, poultry, dairy, produce, and basic packaged goods have risen cumulatively by 20% to 60%. while higher quality or organic items have become financially out of reach for millions of families. For those without access to bulk warehouses or discount alternatives, food affordability has collapsed entirely. Utilities, once predictable, now function like variable taxes. Electricity bills that hovered around $120 to $150 in many regions have climbed toward $220 to $300, driven by grid upgrades, fuel costs, and extreme weather demand. Internet and mobile services, previously stable at $60 to $80, are commonly hitting $100 to $150 per line after fees, surcharges, and equipment charges. These increases apply universally, eliminating the ability of households to cut costs without sacrificing essential services. Transportation has become another financial pressure point. Auto insurance premiums in several states have jumped by 20% to 40% within a single renewal cycle. Routine maintenance, tires, and diagnostic services carry price tags far above pre-2020 norms. Public transportation fares in major metros have quietly risen through incremental increases in service fees, leaving commuters with higher costs despite declining system reliability. Even leisure activities, once a small relief in a stressful economy, have become luxury goods. A simple movie outing can hit $80 to $90 for 3 adults, excluding snacks or transportation. Personal care services, gym memberships, barber visits, and household repairs have risen by double-digit percentages, pushing everyday quality of life items into discretionary territory. This consumer cost explosion has one unifying consequence: it eliminates financial elasticity. Households no longer have room to absorb unexpected bills, supply shocks, or income disruptions. Every dollar is allocated before it arrives, leaving Americans with shrinking autonomy and rising vulnerability. When daily living costs breach affordability across every category, economic stability becomes mathematically impossible. The consumer cost explosion becomes even more dangerous when paired with the structural breakdown happening inside the labor market. America now faces a rare dual crisis: millions of jobs disappearing through automation at the exact moment the nation lacks essential skilled labor needed to keep the physical economy running. This imbalance, oversupply of displaced white-collar workers and undersupply of trades, marks a fundamental malfunction in the employment ecosystem. AI acceleration is the first catalyst. Entire categories of work, design, marketing, administrative support, customer service, copywriting, are being absorbed by algorithmic systems capable of producing outputs at near-zero marginal cost. Companies that once employed teams of 5 to 10 employees can now operate with one person supervising software. The financial incentive is undeniable, replacing a $65,000 employee with a $49 subscription. As a result, layoffs and hiring freezes are increasingly targeted at office roles previously seen as secure career tracks. Yet while white-collar roles disappear, the country faces an acute shortage of electricians, plumbers, welders, HVAC technicians, and construction laborers. In many states, trade vacancies exceed applicants by ratios of 3 to 1 or higher. The average age of these workers is approaching 50, and retirements are accelerating. Basic infrastructure maintenance, power systems, water lines, public transportation, residential construction, depends on labor that simply does not exist in sufficient numbers. This creates an economy where degrees are devalued, certifications are overpriced, and wages are misaligned with national needs. A graduate with $60,000 in student debt earns $45,000 to $55,000, while a licensed tradesperson can exceed $80,000 to $100,000 without a bachelor's degree. Despite this, barriers to entry, training availability, geographic constraints, equipment costs prevent rapid transition from displaced jobs to needed jobs. Meanwhile, corporations trimming labor forces amplify economic vulnerability. Reduced staffing increases workloads, delays promotions, and caps wage growth. Overtime becomes mandatory while compensation stagnates. Workers operate under heightened burnout, yet replacement opportunities have dried up due to hiring contractions. This labor market distortion feeds directly into national instability. A workforce losing secure employment unable to retrain quickly, and facing wage compression cannot support rising costs. At the same time, the absence of essential labor delays housing construction, infrastructure repairs, and manufacturing capacity, worsening affordability. The labor market is no longer simply inefficient. It is operating in reverse, undermining both economic productivity and household survival. The labor market malfunction directly accelerates the next phase of collapse: the rapid shift from income-driven consumption to credit-driven survival. As wages fail to match basic living costs, households increasingly depend on financial products that delay payment rather than improve affordability. This is how an economy quietly enters a debt spiral state, one eerily similar to the conditions that preceded the Great Depression. Buy now, pay later, BNPL, is the clearest signal. Originally marketed as a convenience tool, it has evolved into a replacement for disposable income. Transactions under $40, groceries, clothing essentials, routine household items, categories that never required financing, are now routinely split into 4 payments. For millions, BNPL platforms function as shadow credit lines without the psychological friction of traditional borrowing. Yet the interest equivalent can exceed 30% APR when fees and late charges accumulate. Credit card balances reveal the same pattern. National revolving debt has breached levels equivalent to more than $1.3 trillion, with interest rates surpassing 20% to 25%, even for borrowers with stable histories. Minimum payments increasingly cover interest alone, leaving principal balances stagnant or rising. For households already depleted by healthcare premiums, utilities, and food inflation, this structure ensures they never escape the cycle. The most dangerous element is the emergence of interest-first repayment systems across federal and private loans. Cases where daily interest reaches $20 to $30, combined with inherited balances of $5,000 to $10,000 in deferred charges, make principal reduction mathematically impossible for low to mid-earners. Consumers work, pay, and fall deeper into debt despite doing everything right. This mirrors the 1920s installment credit boom, where families financed furniture, appliances, and basic goods under the illusion of prosperity. When income weakened, defaults cascaded. Today, the same architecture exists, but scaled and digital. Unlike the past, modern credit products have no built-in limits. BNPL platforms do not coordinate with credit bureaus, allowing multiple, overlapping debts across apps. Consumers may owe $200 to $600 monthly across scattered micropayments without realizing the total. As households rely on future income to pay for present survival, the broader economy becomes structurally fragile. Any shock, job loss, medical event, rent increase, instantly converts invisible debts into delinquency. The dependency on perpetual credit is not a symptom of economic stress. It is the mechanism that guarantees systemic failure. The credit-driven survival model becomes even more volatile when layered with a rapidly escalating tax burden. As cities lose population, face pension deficits, absorb rising operational costs, and experience shrinking commercial tax bases, they turn to the only remaining revenue source: ordinary residents. This has unleashed a nationwide tax shockwave that quietly strips households of what little financial stability they have left. Property taxes are the most aggressive pressure point. In multiple counties, bills that once hovered around $5,000 to $7,000 have surged toward $11,000 to $15,000, often in less than 2 assessment cycles. Cook County's jumps from roughly $6,000 to $13,000 are not isolated anomalies. They reflect a structural funding shortfall now passed directly onto homeowners. These increases are not tied to wage growth, market value, or improvements. They are fiscal extractions necessary to cover budget gaps. Renters absorb this indirectly through higher monthly payments, while homeowners face immediate liquidity crises. Sales taxes and service fees add another layer of pressure. In many cities, combined sales tax rates now exceed 10%, silently elevating the cost of every purchase. Municipalities are also deploying new micro-charges on water, trash, electricity, parking, permits, and public transportation. A single utility bill may now include 6 to 12 different surcharges, each representing a budgetary strain disguised as infrastructure maintenance or environmental compliance. These are not optional. They are embedded in the cost of simply existing within city limits. Transportation taxation is expanding through toll lanes and usage-based billing. Roads built using taxpayer money are being sold back through express access pricing, turning public infrastructure into a recurring revenue stream. Driving to work now carries financial penalties not reflected in fuel prices alone. Small commutes can exceed $10 to $20 in toll fees, transforming employment into a taxed activity. The cumulative effect is a financial vice. Tax surges compress household budgets already damaged by debt, inflation, and stagnant wages. They also accelerate migration out of high-cost regions, which in turn deepens municipal deficits and forces further tax hikes, a self-reinforcing downward spiral. As essential services degrade despite higher taxes, public trust erodes, and the economic load shifts even more heavily onto shrinking populations. This tax shockwave is not merely a budget issue. It is a structural force pushing millions toward financial breaking points. The tax shockwave is most visible in America's major cities, where affordability has collapsed so severely that even long-term residents can no longer participate in the local economy. These cities serve as the clearest demonstrations of a system that is no longer misfiring. It is breaking in real time. Miami is the frontline example. A city once marketed as a cosmopolitan paradise is now defined by extreme overcrowding and structural unaffordability. Single-family homes routinely shelter 6 to 10 adults because rents that sat around $1,800 to $2,200 a few years ago have surged toward $3,500 to $4,500 for basic units. Many workers earning stable incomes are now forced into improvised living spaces, converted garages, backyard efficiencies, or shared bedrooms. With insurance premiums and municipal fees rising alongside rent, Miami's affordability crisis is no longer an inconvenience. It is a survival issue. Chicago showcases a different version of collapse. The city's property tax explosion has become financially devastating for both homeowners and renters. Assessments jumping from $6,000 to $13,000 on standard homes have destabilized entire neighborhoods. For renters, those increases translate into monthly hikes of $300 to $600, even in previously moderate-cost areas. Combined with declining city services and budget strain, Chicago's affordability deterioration is moving faster than its residents can adapt. Santa Monica exposes an extreme top-end distortion. In a single building, studios priced at $4,500 to $4,700, one-bedrooms exceeding $6,000, and three-bed units reaching $12,000 illustrate a market completely detached from economic reality. These are not luxury penthouses. They are ordinary units marketed at extraordinary prices. The presence of monthly rents approaching $30,000 for top floors shows how far the region has drifted from any rational standard of cost versus income. New York, long known for high prices, has entered a new phase where even dual-income households struggle to remain within city limits. Rental bidding wars, move-in fees exceeding $5,000, and regulatory costs embedded into every service create a financial threshold that eliminates entire income brackets. The result is mass outbound migration and an increasingly polarized economic landscape where only extreme wealth or extreme sacrifice allows residency. Across these cities, a shared pattern emerges. Affordability is not declining. It has collapsed past the point of recovery. The urban core of the U.S. is transforming into a system where normal workers cannot live, grow, or survive without severe financial compromise, signaling a nationwide urban unraveling. The collapse of urban affordability has triggered a deeper, more corrosive fallout. The unraveling of the middle class at an emotional, psychological, and behavioral level. Economic pressure has reached a point where it no longer affects lifestyles, it reshapes identities. Millions who followed the correct path of education, work, and responsibility now find themselves trapped in a cycle where survival consumes every waking hour. Burnout has become the dominant condition of the workforce. People working 40 to 60 hours a week report having less than $200 to $400 disposable income after basic bills. The result is a population functioning on constant financial stress, unable to participate in cultural life, social gatherings, or personal development. Hobbies that once defined individual purpose, writing, music, art, travel, fitness, are disappearing because people lack both time and energy. Daily routines revolve around commuting, working, paying bills, and recovering enough to repeat the cycle. The erosion of aspiration is even more alarming. Traditional milestones, homeownership, financial independence, marriage, children, retirement, are now inaccessible to large segments of the population. Many adults in their late 20s to early 40s report that they cannot afford a one-bedroom apartment without assistance. Even those earning $70,000 to $90,000 annually are stuck living with parents or roommates because every cost category has decoupled from income. Dreams once considered achievable now feel like relics of a past economy. This psychological collapse feeds directly into social detachment. People withdraw from communities because participation has become too expensive. Social media highlights lifestyles, weddings, international trips, luxury apartments that feel impossible, creating a constant comparison loop that intensifies the sense of personal failure, even when the cause is systemic. The middle class isn't disappearing quietly. It's dissolving from the inside out. As the economic load grows heavier, individuals lose not only purchasing power, but the motivation and emotional capacity that once sustained society. This transformation isn't measured in dollars. It's measured in the shrinking belief that a stable future is still possible. The psychological unraveling of the middle class sets the stage for the next rupture, the compounded shock projected for 2026. The warning signs are no longer abstract. They are embedded in every national metric. The U.S. now carries $38 trillion in federal debt, accelerating at a pace that outstrips GDP growth, tax revenue, and productivity. Interest payments alone are approaching levels once reserved for full-scale recessions, consuming fiscal space that previously funded social programs, infrastructure, and emergency support. At the same time, job markets are tightening in ways that reveal structural fragility. AI-driven displacement is expected to accelerate through 2025 and peak in 2026, potentially eliminating hundreds of thousands of office roles while offering no equivalent replacements. Companies facing higher borrowing costs and declining consumer spending are expected to intensify layoffs, contract hours, and freeze new hiring. This contraction hits at the exact moment households have depleted savings and exhausted credit access. Housing markets will face renewed instability as more homeowners encounter rising insurance premiums, expiring low-rate mortgages, and property tax hikes. Mortgages written at 2% to 3% will transition towards 6% to 7%, pushing monthly payments beyond affordability for millions. Renters, already on the edge, will be exposed to further increases as operating costs for landlords surge. The cumulative strain ensures that 2026 will be a year where housing insecurity spreads far beyond traditionally vulnerable groups. Institutional capacity is also weakening. Cities operating with declining tax bases, rising pension obligations, and growing service demands will face budget shortfalls that limit their ability to provide safety nets. Federal support will be constrained by interest obligations. Social Security's strain will intensify. Emergency programs will be forced into restriction. All indicators point to a convergence: rising debt, shrinking jobs, destabilized housing, and weakened institutions forming a synchronized national pressure point. And when all four fail together, the system doesn't bend, it breaks.